This is the Patriots Catch-22 podcast with Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
I'm Evan Lazar. Evan Lazar. Hello, everybody. Nailed it. Joined as always by Alex Barth. That's a bit. That's a match. No risk it, no biscuit.
22.
Here is Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
But they are still unknowns.
A better coordinator than Gerard Mayo was.
But you're not hiring him to be a coordinator.
But Gerard Mayo was never a coordinator.
But you're not hiring him to be a coordinator.
I know. I'm hiring
him to be a head coach.
And I'm hiring him to run
head
the
coach
freaking
of the
offense.
football team. He
I'm
is the
hiring him
boss.
to score 35 a game.
The buck stops with him.
Oh,
he is
man.
the boss.
So Kyle Shanahan's a shitty head coach, is what you're saying.
22.
You got me so fired up that I cursed.
That was awesome.
On the
That
air.
was, and I got more than maybe any show we've done. I got a ton of positive feedback on like just people reaching out on social media or whatever.
Okay. Just gas yourself up.
No, I'm
right.
saying like to both of us that like, hey, this was, you guys had the conversation. That's what I wanted to do. Like, yeah. I wasn't, we said that going into the show. We wanted to lay out the argument for both sides. It wasn't one of us trying to necessarily convince the other one. It was just, here's the case for one, here's the case for both. We or the other. We both thought they'd each be a good hire. And I think that resonated with a lot of people. So I appreciate everybody that reached out. And that was, it's going to be, we have a tough act to follow. It's going to be tough to follow that show. That was one of the best shows we've done.
There you go. So you got your way. You won. You won the argument. Mr. Kraft sided with you.
They were waiting to hear that until they made the hire. So clearly I presented the argument better.
Well, of course, they made the decision based off of the show last week, and they decided
Robert was
to go with you.
Looking at his phone, going back and forth between the contacts.
You know what? He makes a lot of good points. That's what they were saying. You won. So, credit to you, I guess. I mean, you haven't won anything yet. You got to win.
No, pressure's on me now. You just get to sit back. If it doesn't work out, you get to say, I told you so. If it does work out, you can say, well, it would have worked with Ben Johnson too.
They run the ball 35 times a game and are, 8 and 9.
Oh, well,
I said they would be.
If you're going to talk about run rate, let's not look up what the Lions' run rate is, because
we'll get to all this stuff. All right,
kind of the same.
I know. You
kind of the same.
You have all the ammo because the people have been coming at your boy a little bit over now. Now that the dust has settled, it feels like there are some anti-Vrabel people that are starting to come out. Some Titans fans, people like that.
The math people.
We'll get to all that here in a second. Evan Lazar, Alex Barth. If you don't know by now, I'm sure you do. Patriots Catch-22. Next couple hours with you here today. It's our first show since the Patriots announced the hiring of Mike Vrabel as their head coach. So we haven't been on the air since the hire. We haven't been on the air since the press conference. So we got a lot of things to talk about here today in terms of all that and spin it forward. But I think the biggest thing that I wanted to start with today, because when we had that argument last week, I obviously knew Vrabel the player. I knew of Vrabel the coach from the outside looking in, but I never spent any real time with him or observing him or at press conferences of his or anything like that. So I didn't know him as deeply as maybe I do now. And I think the one thing that I knew when they hired him was they were going to get, and I hope I'm not, speaking out of turn, they're going to get an a-hole, right? Yeah. That was going to be able to come in here and say, you and you out, you and you in. This is what we're doing. This is our direction. This is our plan. And he definitely is going to do that. I feel as though that stuff still applies. He's going to get the right people. He's going to get the people that do things the right way. He's going to get football people to run football. He is going to coach a more disciplined team, a more fundamentally sound team, more aware and situationally aware, certainly football team, which was all the things that were the selling points.
Yeah.
The one thing that stood out to me just watching his introductory press conference, having him in here on PU for 15 minutes the other day, and then his interview, I would say yesterday with EEI was really good too. And having all of these interviews now as Patriots head coach, the number one thing that I think I undersold initially with this was how analytically minded and detailed he is when it comes to football. Like, this is a guy that can talk your ear off about football philosophy, strategy, scheme, analytics, sports science, player health, mental health, and player just in terms of philosophy of how to deal with the modern player, all these different walks of being a head coach, personnel, scouting. What is it that you look for in wide receivers? He's got an answer.
Right.
How are you going to apply analytics to the football program? He's thought of these things. And in that respect, he reminds me a little bit of Bill, in that he has all of these types of things that go into building a football team and go into building a program. He's thought these things through, and he has answers for all of it, and sound and smart, intellectual answers about a lot of it. This is not, I played linebacker and I'm a meathead and we're gonna bite kneecaps. Okay, this is a guy that's really thought things through in a lot of ways about coaching. So I undersold that aspect of him about how just detailed and really just football savvy he is, because I knew he was a great motivator. I knew he was a good defensive mind. You knew he was a great culture guy. But I do think that he has a lot more of that element to him than I expected. And it really does feel like, and look, we're in the honeymoon phase right now with it. Let's see what happens come September if they start losing games and things like that. But right now, it really does feel like they've found the perfect middle ground between Bill Belichick and Gerard Mayo, where you now have the intellect of somebody who thinks the game more on the lines of Bill and can go to that depth that Bill could go to with the game, but also has a little bit more of a softer touch and of a modern player philosophy. And I think that that's great. I'm excited about all that.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's a good caveat that it's one thing to say all the right things. It's another thing to execute them. We thought Gerard and some of the coaching staff at this time last year were saying a lot of the right things. But the difference is when a lot of the stuff Mike Vrabel talks about, he's done. Yeah. He's done before, whether he did it in Tennessee. You talked about the analytics stuff, which we'll get into, and I think you might be surprised on my take on that. He's done that in Cleveland. He spent last year in Cleveland with what might be the most analytically driven organization in the league. But no, the stuff you're talking about that surprised you, this is what I meant when I said program builder, right? Like, the core concepts aren't, there is that, well, we're going to work hard and we're going to respect each other and we're going to be accountable, like all those kind of buzzwords. Yeah. But it's also, we're going to do this and this in player evaluation when it comes to analytics, and this is what we want, guys that can do this, right? It's not just we want guys that work hard. He gave that answer, I forget which interview. He did so many interviews the other day, which credit to him. I think it was the one with Dan Roach where he talked about the wide receivers, and he goes, we want guys with the big catch radius. We want guys that can create after the catch. We want guys that are, right? That's actual. So it's not just we want guys that work hard and that stuff, the coach buzzwords. There's actual football substance behind it. And when you combine those two, that's where you get your program. And he didn't get into the nuts and bolts of it. I didn't expect him to get into the nuts and bolts of it in the first few days, but between the interview he did, the initial press conference, and then interviews he did subsequently, he had a good interview with Zolak and Bertrand on 98.5, some of the other stuff, like, you can kind of see the skeleton for what the program is. Yeah. We're really getting an idea of what this is going to look like. Fullback might be coming back. Credit to you for getting that one out of him. Again, he kind of talked about what he wants with the receivers. I thought it was notable when he was asked, basically, you have the fourth pick, you have all this cap space, and just your thoughts. He went right to the offensive line immediately. Yeah. And there was another answer he gave in another interview where he was kind of asked about building the roster, and he went right to the offensive line. So we're kind of seeing these core concepts early on, but here you have a guy that isn't just going to talk about the core concepts. We've seen him execute this in the past.
So he has plans.
Yes.
And I hate to kick the last guy when he's down. And I don't want to do that. But to compare and contrast, Gerard had concepts of plans, right? Like, he had ideas, but I don't think he necessarily knew how to take those ideas and turn them into tangible practices, right? And actually execute those ideas. And then
they were more overarching than specific.
And then they got into everything, and they get into the season, and they get into training camp, and then the train is going 100 miles an hour, and things start going really, really fast. What I look at with Mike Vrabel is that he already has actual concrete evidence and plans of, this is what we're going to do. This is how I put it into practice in Tennessee, and this is how it's going to work. And that's refreshing. It's refreshing to have somebody that is asked, and I know you know that the analytics answer he gave just made me just I mean, I could listen to that all day.
Well, I think we can. That's
repeat.
what's kind of crazy about it. Is like you go back to that argument we had last week.
Yeah.
And it was a philosophical argument. It wasn't, debating is this right or wrong. You go back to that argument, and then you listen to what he said over the last 48 hours. And there are things we can both point to and hang our hat on. That's like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's the guy I want coaching my football team, which I think is kind of crazy.
That to me is
in a good way.
That's what swayed me.
Right.
I was already convinced, okay, it's a proven coach with a proven, concept, and I understand why the hire is happening, and I didn't need to be that sold on it, you know what I mean? But what really put it over the top for me the last couple of days is all these elements of this is a guy that is more modern thinking and more analytically driven than I knew, that I anticipated. Now, is some of that because of his year in Cleveland and he's coming off that? And you mentioned
probably part of it.
Yeah, so Paul D. Podesta's in Cleveland, who's the Jonah Hill character in Moneyball, right?
Yeah.
For people that don't know. So he was a big analytics guy in baseball. The Cleveland Browns hired him to run their analytics department and bring analytics to football. And they have a huge analytics department. Like, it's one of the biggest in the league. Now, the Rams are very analytically driven and have two guys in their entire analytics department. So it's not necessarily about volume. The Patriots currently have one person employed to run analytics in the entire football department.
It's Rothstein, right?
No. No, Rothstein is in football. But this is, their director of research is the one guy who's running analytics for the Patriots. The Patriots, in a lot of ways, are dinosaurs when it comes to applying analytics to scouting, to the personnel side of things, and we can get to that. But all these different things that he's said, that he's talked about, has really been encouraging in terms of having a modern view, having an innovative view of the game, but also still understanding that football is football. And it's one in the trenches, and there's a physical element, there's an aggressive element, there's a motivational element, and all those things are true. What I worry about is when you hire a coach that can't apply both, right? That's only worried about, we're going to be fast, and we're going to be aggressive, and we're going to be physical, and we're going to be tough. Like, cool, yeah, that's important. But, there's all these other things now that go into football that we know. So with all that being said, that's a lot of sunshines and rainbows up the new head coach's you-know-what.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. He's done a good job for the 2 days that he's been on the job.
Long way to go.
Long way to go. The concerns that I still have about this entire situation are still there until we find out more information. And I understand that I'm maybe getting concerned about something that hasn't happened yet in terms of the coordinator interviews, because we haven't heard much about where we're headed with that. But
I would think that starts soon.
He said that they were going to start talking about it yesterday afternoon, after all of his media obligations were finally over with. And him and Elliott and Ryan Cowden and those guys are going to get to work on the interview process for the coaching staff. But a couple of things with that. One, it can't be understated how major of a hire offensive coordinator is. It is a massive, massive hire for the direction of this franchise, and I want to kick around some names and things like that as well. But just from a big picture perspective, it's a major, major aspect of this is who he's going to tab as coordinator. And if you talk to people down in Tennessee, it wasn't always great in terms of putting together a staff down there. He didn't really, and this is just their word, so I'm just taking them at their word down in Tennessee. Didn't really get along with Matt LaFleur, and then promoted Arthur Smith to avoid losing him to Matt LaFleur, because Matt LaFleur wanted to bring Arthur Smith with him to Green Bay. So he kind of, I think lucked in is the wrong word, but he sort of, by association kind of stumbled into a coaching staff on the offense side of the ball that worked for a while there in Tennessee. So who he hires as offensive coordinator, and then obviously, what kind of offense they build is still, to me, the number one question that I have. The number two question, of course, is how this is all going to work out in the front office. There's been a lot of reporting out there, Mike Reese, Tom Curran, people that are in the know and that you trust, that Mike Vrabel is going to be the last line, right? He's going to have the final say. on personnel. But Mike Vrabel is not going to be scouting 400 college prospects and grinding the tape all off season of, who's the guy you told me to watch earlier today that's at like San Jose State?
Oh, Nick Nash?
Yeah.
You need to watch. You do need to watch Nick Nash.
So he's at San Jose State,
Won
right?
the Triple Crown.
Yeah. So, he's
As
not
a receiver.
I'm sorry. He's not watching, day 3 guys, right? Like he's not grinding film on
day 3 guy.
He's not grinding the film on all these guys, right? That's going to be Cowden, and that's going to be Elliott Wolf. So can you get the coordinator hire right? Can you pick players? Like that's
Right.
what this is going to come down to. I think we all feel really good about Vrabel as the head coach of the team, and you feel like you're in good hands in terms of the head coach of the football team, but that's only one piece of it. That's a big piece, but it's only one piece. So now how do we move forward with those two things are still concerns that I have, because just from the outside looking in, just from my opinion, what I look at with Vrabel and Ryan Cowden and Elliott Wolf and that whole dynamic, I kind of look at a peaceful transition of power. Like that to me looks like Ryan Cowden and Mike Vrabel are going to be running the show here, not before long. But Elliott Wolf has the institutional knowledge of what the roster looks like right now, what the coaching staff looks like right now, how the buildings run. So they're keeping him on to kind of help transition into the Vrabel era. But when it comes to April and it comes to the draft or it comes to March and free agency, how are they going to run the board and how are they going to go about picking the players is a massive piece of this. So I don't know which way you want to go from there, but I think that, we know who the people in charge are on the personnel side. The coordinators is more about kicking names.
So I
around.
guess that's easier to start. Maybe we buy some time. Maybe we get some coordinator interview. If you see me looking at my phone or Evan looking at his phone, I'm just trying to. We don't have the computers because there's no desk. So if there's an interview, we want to be able to react to it.
Yeah, stop looking at your phone, all right?
I'm trying to find out if we have news.
Pay attention.
On the front office thing, like it almost kind of feels like now Bill would grind the film, but maybe not to the level that some of the other guys did, just because he was also doing the head coaching stuff. It kind of feels like the setup under Bill, right? Where Ryan Cowden, Elliott Wolf, they're going to do the legwork. They're going to get all the reports together, and then they're going to go to Mike Vrabel and basically be like, here are your options.
Yeah.
And then Mike Vrabel looks at the options and he picks, right? Which I don't think is a bad setup. With Wolf, I think you're right. So much of this process is already completed. The scouting process does not begin in January. It begins really in August. And in some cases began a year ago or 2 years ago with some of these guys who are have played multiple years, who are seniors. So you can't just blow the whole staff out. You can't start from scratch in January. You would be so far behind. It would be impossible to catch up from how far behind you are. So to me, Elliott Wolf's here because him and his staff did all the work during the football season. He's going to be able to kind of pass that forward. Like you said, some of the institutional knowledge, and then we'll see when the draft's over if he sticks around or if it's all right.
Yeah.
We'll take it from here. Ryan Cowden will take it from here, and you move on from that. But I don't hate the setup. For what this year is, I don't know that I would keep it permanently. I think it's basically Elliott Wolf kind of auditioning for his job at this point. But for what this year is, I think that's probably the right way to structure it.
Yeah, you mentioned Vrabel's comments about receivers and what he looks for in wide receivers, which, by the way, not to get into speculation about trades, he described A.J. Brown.
He did describe it.
Yeah.
He also kind of described Ted McMillan.
Ted McMillan is not physical like that. Ted McMillan is...
Fair.
He described A.J. Brown. A guy, contested catches.
Well, it's funny. I saw that quote going around, and everybody's just saying he described whoever their favorite receiver is that's available.
Oh, no. He described A.J. Brown
right.
to a T. Contested catches, yards after catch ability, tough to tackle, physical in the run game. It's A.J. Brown, right? And so he'll hopefully, with this setup, it's going to be Vrabel and whoever he hires as the offensive coordinator saying, for us to make this scheme work, this is the archetype. This is the type of player that we need. And then Elliott Wolf and Ryan Cowden can then go and narrow down the list to, okay, these are the 5 guys that fit that type of mold, and then Vrabel will then go watch some tape himself and kind of come up with it of who exactly he feels is the best out of that group. So that's how it runs in a lot of places. The coaches come to the personnel people, and they say, these are the groceries that I need to make this meal, and then they're supposed to go and find the right ingredients and then bring them back to the coach. So it's a fine setup. I don't mind it. I think it's a little bit awkward, obviously, with the holdovers from the last regime and Elliott Wolf and Matt Groh and Cameron Williams, the director of college scouting, Pat Stewart, who's a high ranking official in the Patriots front office. Like, those people are all still here currently.
Yeah.
They were all at the press conference on Monday, so they're all still currently here, and it is a little bit of an awkward dynamic there, but if Vrabel's the guy that has the hammer, as Mike Reese put it on your station, I think, then everybody's got to kind of fall in line underneath Vrabel, and he's the one that hopefully will be able to keep everybody on schedule, on tracks, and in check. So that's the front office side of it. I agree with you. I still feel like it will be Ryan Cowden and Mike Vrabel for the long term. And maybe we see some of these other guys phased out over the course of the next couple of years. But the other big element to this as well, just going back a little history on Ryan Cowden and Mike Vrabel, this was supposed to happen in Tennessee.
Right.
These two guys were supposed to take power in Tennessee after they fired John Robinson in Tennessee. Cowden was named the interim general manager for the time being. And the owner, she said that, Cowden was going to be the general manager, Vrabel was going to be the head coach. And then in order to basically avoid giving too much power to Mike Vrabel, because that's his guy, you're basically handing the building over to Mike Vrabel at that point. In order to to avoid giving up too much power to Mike Vrabel, she changed her mind and hired Rand Carthen. And that was sort of what caused the house of cards, right? Like that's sort of what caused it all to fall down there in Tennessee. So from the outside looking in, this looks like Mr. Kraft is saying, we'll do it.
Right.
we'll give you the keys, and with Ryan Cowden, we're cool with that. So that's the front office side of it. Before we get into all the coordinators, because I made a list, you made a list, we all have names, and I think it's super important to talk about. We do have to pay the bills here first and say, hey, Patriots fans, if you want to see Toyota's best offers, including those not seen on TV, go to buyatoyota.com. It's Toyota's official website for deals from the official vehicle of the New England Patriots. Toyota, let's go places, and easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the New England Patriots. Okay, before we open it up to the phones and to the emails, which we have plenty of, I do want to talk about offensive coordinator and where they go. Now, big news yesterday, Patriots adjacent, Tommy Rees goes back to Cleveland as their offensive coordinator. So Tommy Rees is off the board. Where would you like to see them go with offensive coordinator? And I think it's kind of Josh McDaniels versus the field right now for a lot of people. Right. So how do you specifically feel about Josh?
So I'm still kind of where we were last week, which is I'm not opposed to it. I don't think it'd be a bad hire. I'm curious how much more there is to the 2020 Cam Newton offense, because I think they're basically going to end up running a version. They should run a version of that with Drake May if Josh McDaniels is here. There's obviously the big plus. He's not a flight risk. He's not going anywhere. You have some security. You have some, you're going to build continuity with him and Drake May. It'd be a fine hire. I'm curious about some of those up and coming guys. I said last week, can he find his own Ben Johnson?
Yeah.
I would still kind of poke around, talk to people in that world and see if you find somebody that you really believe in. I keep getting them mixed up. Matt, Mike, which one's in LA? Mike LaFleur's an interesting one.
I get that mixed up too. Two M's, like brothers.
I can't do the Harbaughs either.
Okay, that one's easier.
The other one is
Mike LaFleur is the Rams offensive coordinator.
The other one, Mike Reese threw this name out. Dave Rangone, who I think is the quarterbacks coach in LA.
Yeah,
right?
something like that. Quarterbacks pass game or something.
Who worked for Arthur Smith. So there's a bit of a through line there. It was interesting though when I looked up. So I did this whole thing before Mike Vrabel got fired, and I posted it on Sunday. You can read it on 985thesportshub.com. It wasn't so much a list of potential offensive coordinators. This is definitely part of it, but it was more, and I was texting you during this. I think you're getting annoyed with me.
Yeah, because you were throwing out random names.
Well, so it was
Deuce Staley.
It was
JT Barrett. Like,
well, so don't spoil it. Don't spoil the take.
Put everybody on the list, Alex. Put 50 guys on there.
But this is my point. I was getting so sick of he's a Patriots guy, he's a Belichick guy, he's not going to go outside the building. It was kind of a gut response to that take and you need a pipeline offensive coordinator take to just be like, hey, here's all the offensive coaches he's been connected to
all
this football journey.
150 of them.
And 31 names on there. But when I went through that list, like there's definitely some offensive coordinators on there,
Yeah.
whether it's Josh McDaniels, whether it's Tim Kelly. I had Tommy Rees on there. That's now not happening. But the guys I found that were really interesting were like the guys who are a year or two away from being an offensive coordinator, the guys that need maybe one more job to round out the resume and be an offensive coordinator, whether that's a guy like Deuce Staley in Cleveland, who I think was a top offensive coordinator candidate at one point, and I don't know whatever happened to that, but a guy like Deuce Staley, a guy like Luke Steckel, who's his background's interesting. He's coached a bunch of different positions, been a bunch of different places. He was the Raiders tight ends coach last year, right? Hello, Brock Bowers.
He was in Tennessee at some point,
so
right?
Vrabel kept him in Tennessee, which is always telling to me.
Yeah.
Coach comes in, looks at the staff, 90% of those guys are getting blown out. He kept Luke Steckel.
Yeah.
So that tells me something. JT Barrett was another one who he was on the
He's
staff
with the Lions now.
when Barrett was at Ohio State. Right. You want a little Ben Johnson flavor? JT Barrett is the assistant quarterbacks coach in Detroit.
Yep.
So you bring him in as the quarterbacks coach and maybe kind of get him going. So if you hire a guy like a LaFleur or like one of these up and coming names when he moves on, now you have JT Barrett. Now you have Luke Steckel. Now you have one of these guys that's ready to become your offensive coordinator. So I'm with you. I think it's McDaniels against the field. If it is McDaniels, instead of the pipeline, the next big question is wide receivers coach. Wes Welker is obviously a name that comes to mind. He was teammates with Hines Ward in Pittsburgh before Vrabel. Before he came here, Hines Ward's now wide receivers coach at Arizona State. They have they're all underclassmen, so nobody knows them because they're not in the draft this year, but they have some up-and-coming wide receivers. That's a guy I'd be interested in bringing in. I don't know how connected he is to Sean Jefferson. That's another name, though. If it's McDaniels, I'm looking at wide receivers coach. If it's not, you're looking at that pipeline, but there's some really good pipeline names out there.
So my first of all, I'm a huge fan of Josh McDaniels.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to like put my nose up to people right now, but I can tell a lot of people that are negative on Josh McDaniels don't necessarily think the game through like the lens of a coach, because I can tell you, talking to coaches around the league, Josh McDaniels is a mother to go up against.
So
right?
I'll say this about Josh McDaniels, and you tell me if I'm off base. There are things he does as an offense coordinator that bug me, certainly.
Yeah.
I'll take those things, though. Like, I'll deal with that. Like, his play sequencing gets annoying sometimes. Obviously, the third and long shotgun runs. Like, sometimes he feels a little situationally conservative. I'll deal with that for all the positives he brings versus, like, most of, like, some of the stuff other offense coordinators do where they just get too cute with it or this and that. McDaniels isn't perfect, but when you actually step back and look at the big picture, the stuff that annoys you about him is really not that bad because he compensates for it so significantly in other ways.
He's an excellent coordinator.
Yeah.
He's not a good head coach. We know that, but we're not hiring him.
Right. Those are two different
We're
things.
not hiring him to be the head coach.
As we discussed last week, you were hiring somebody to be the head coach. He became the head coach. Now you're hiring somebody to be the head coordinator. That person is not going to be the head coach.
Yeah, so he's a really good coordinator. I think the biggest things with McDaniels, his experience is really, I guess, just comforting in a way. A lot like Vrabel's experience is comforting because you are handing this coordinator a 22-year-old franchise potential quarterback, right? And Drake May has all of the bells and whistles to be a great quarterback in this league, but he's not a finished product. He still has a ways to go. He still has to, figure out that line to cut down on turnovers but still be aggressive. Was it aggressive but not reckless?
Oh
right?
my God! When he said said with the math that made you
Yeah.
feel things. When I heard how many times have I come on the show, Evan, whether we're talking about Drake May or some other quarterback, and said aggressive but not reckless.
Right. So aggressive. But not reckless.
that was a great.
So
soundbite.
he still has a ways to go in those types of things. I still think he has a ways to go in certain things mentally too. In terms of reading coverage and setting things at the line of scrimmage and all things that young quarterbacks have to learn. Like, I'm not saying that Drake is behind or like different than other guys.
It's just where he's at in his development.
Right. So there's still a ways to go there. So as much as I would be excited about a Josh McCown or excited about bringing back a Nick Caley, who I think has a great mix of old and new, right? You can run some of the Patriots stuff that they ran for years that was successful, but meld it with the McVay stuff. Like, that's obviously extremely intriguing. Clint Kubiak is the name that people have thrown out that is from the Shanahan tree.
Another good one.
Gary Kubiak, obviously his father. Like those guys, like, they're intriguing guys. Tommy Reese was an intriguing candidate, but all these guys you're handing, Nick Haley, for example, just to use him. Nick Haley has never coached quarterbacks before. So you're handing a second-year quarterback in a big pivotal year of his development to an offensive guy. It's not Matt Patricia, but you're handing him to a guy that's never coached the position before.
Now quarterbacks coach becomes incredibly important, and
right.
That's where I liked Reese, though. I wouldn't put Reese quite in that group because he is a quarterback guy.
But he didn't coach. He coached quarterbacks in college. He coached tight ends last year for the Browns.
Yeah, but he is a quarterback background.
Yeah, and he is a quarterback.
Yeah.
Well, not a good one, but he was a quarterback.
Oh, look, Jalen Milroe had his best season under Reese. And I know some people are pretty down on Jalen Milroe right now.
Sailed. But he's 32 years old. Okay? Like, he's a young guy. Josh McDaniels, you don't worry about any of that. Josh McDaniels has called plays in this league for 2 decades. He's worked with all sorts of quarterbacks, and I understand that he has had varying degrees of success outside of Brady. Some of it not so good. But he's worked with a bunch of different QBs. Yeah. You mentioned the Cam Newton offense in 2020. Do I want Drake running like Cam Newton? No, because Cam Newton's a different type of athlete, right? He's 6'6", 250 pounds.
He's got, 30 pounds?
Yeah, it's a different type of dude. So you're not going to be ramming Drake May into the line of scrimmage on the goal line like you were with Cam Newton.
Oh, could you use Joe Milton as a package player and make that part of the offense?
But
no, I'm dead serious. Like, that's something Josh would do, too.
Maybe.
Can you have a Joe Milton package where you put him in there and they go in that full house formation they had with Cam, and when you're on the goal line or it's 3rd and 1 and you run that stuff? Like, Josh would do that. That, to me, seems like something Josh would do that I don't know that some of these other guys would do. They'd get cute and put, like, the right tackle back there or something. So, no, like, that, it's good to bring up because there is some relevance there.
So, my point being with McDaniels, if you're somebody that's like, oh, his offense is archaic, it's a Stone Age offense, and is he going to be able to do some of the things that these new offensive coordinators, like I heard Dan Orlovsky talking about, the new age RPOs, the 4x1s, like all that kind of stuff. I would urge you to go watch the 2020 Patriots. And I understand the 2020 Patriots fell apart and their offense wasn't great in terms of the production.
As much as anything else.
But he had Cam Newton, who couldn't throw anymore. And he had Demir Byrd as his top outside receiver. He did not have a ton of talent.
Was Ryan Izzo the top tight end on that
Ryan
team?
Izzo was a top tight end. Like, they didn't have a ton of talent on that team. And the number one thing that I would point to, they were 8th in the league in DVOA rushing the football that year. They were a top 10 rushing offense in 2020 with Cam Newton. So that shows me that he has the chops and he has it in his Rolodex, on his menu to be able to run design quarterback run, to be able to run RPO, to be able to run different gun variations that all we're really talking about is making yourself more efficient in the gun, because a lot of these young quarterbacks don't want to play from under center. So in order to make more out of the gun, you have to be more scheme diverse. You can't just have him drop back pass from the gun all the time like he's Tom Brady. It's not going to work. So you have to add in things like window dressing, like motion, like read option, like RPO, all these different bells and whistles that teams use with Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, go on Lamar Jackson. Like, that's how you make it easier for the quarterback. So he's not Brady coming to the line of scrimmage, looking at the defense, checking the play, making a perfect throw. Like, we don't have to do all that stuff because we have all this other scheme related. We're weaponizing the scheme with all this other stuff. And I wouldn't jump to the conclusion that McDaniels doesn't have the ability to do that, but he just hasn't had the quarterback to do it with other than Cam.
Right.
You're not going to move the pocket with Tom Brady.
No. You want to do that with Derek Carr?
Right. Like, you're not going to run a lot of boots and a lot of movement plays when you have Tom Brady as your quarterback. And this isn't a knock on Brady because he did a million other things amazing.
Right.
But it just wasn't his skill set.
Stylistically different.
Right. So I was, just with McDaniels, he hasn't necessarily had a quarterback that has the skill set of Drake May, that has that kind of tools. If you wanted to like put together the quarterbacks that he worked with, it was like Cam Newton's legs with, a good arm talent quarterback from the pocket, then like maybe you could do it that way. But he's never had the complete package in terms of what everything is on the menu now. You can run him, he can throw the ball, you can move him out of the pocket, like you can do anything you really want to do. And I watched a lot of the 2020 McDaniels offense over the last couple of days with Cam. I saw a little bit of the Raiders offense. There's more of that stuff in his playbook that you just didn't call because it wasn't what you were ordering off the menu with the quarterbacks he was working with, then maybe meets the eye. So as you can tell by all, like I would hire Josh McDaniels for this position. I really feel comfortable with McDaniels. You mentioned some of his warts, like he's not perfect. I don't think that he's the most, motion heavy coordinator. He runs a little bit more of a stagnant offense, at least what he did, with the Patriots and with the Raiders recently. But the one thing that really stands out to me is he's got that ability to take the 2022 Cam Newton offense, 2020 Cam Newton offense with like the rookie year Mac Jones and like a little bit of what he did in Vegas in 22 and put those two things together. So now you have the drop back pass game of a Mac Jones, of a Derek Carr with the run game of a Cam Newton. And that's really intriguing. Like if that's the way that they go, that's really intriguing. And you're giving your young quarterback to an experienced guy who we're not worried about. He's never called plays before. He's never worked with quarterbacks before. He's never coordinated an offense before. We're not worried about any of those things. Like last year, it was always Alex Van Pelt's never called plays. So we're worried about that, right? We're worried about that sort of thing. If you hired a Josh McCown, tight pants guy, it's exciting. He's the new guy, right? He's the it guy in town. He's never coordinated an offense before. So we don't know. We don't know how much of that offense is Kevin O'Connell. Probably a lot of it.
Do you think they could drag McCown away in a lateral move? I would love him as the quarterback's coach.
So the issue, with a lot of this, and when we start to put together staffs and stuff like that, it's not impossible, but we're crossing languages here, right? Like,
fair enough.
Because Josh McDaniels will be EP guy, right? He's going to come in and run Earhart Perkins. Josh McCown's a West Coast tree type of guy, right? Kevin O'Connell, same thing would be said for a lot of those guys that Clint Kubiak, any one of these guys that we've thrown out. So if you want to stick to the EP system and the roots of the McDaniels system, then you got to get McDaniels guys to come and coach quarterbacks, right? Like, you got to get guys that understand the language.
Could JT Barrett come in there?
It's possible. Lions run some stuff that is the Lions offense is kind of smorgasbord of everything.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of Rams, it's a little bit of EP in terms of their protections and their rules up front. So you could maybe do something like that. I hear what you're saying though, like a kind of younger, more up and coming mind to be underneath Josh.
So let me give you two more names that I'm curious about. I don't know how realistic either of these are, but I think they're worth discussing.
Yeah.
Bill O'Brien is obviously at BC. Was on with Schefter a couple weeks ago, said he likes it there, but he didn't entirely rule out that he wouldn't take a call from the NFL. Called right in to talk to Vrabel on EEI the other day. That one's kind of interesting to me. And that wouldn't be with Josh. That would be, you're hiring him as the offensive coordinator. And the other one is, where's Alex Van Pelt in all this? He's not going back to Cleveland. We know that because Tommy Reese is there. Is he going to get another offensive coordinator job? Which I think he could. But if he doesn't, and I know you talked about crossing languages, but part of me is like, I just think Van Pelt's a fantastic teacher.
Yeah.
Right?
I think he's
a great teacher. So could you kind of lock him in a room with McDaniels for a week, have McDaniels drill everything to him, and now he gets to keep working with Drake May on some of the technique stuff and some of the fundamental stuff, but would he take a demotion here? Or at that point, is it, well, if I'm going to be a quarterback's coach, I'm going to go somewhere else, so it's not a demotion? Like, do you get what I'm saying? Where does he fit in all this?
I do. My concern with mixing guys from different trees is that a lot of the way that these offenses are designed, it's not so much that I don't think Alex Van Pelt could learn the verbiage of Josh McDaniels' playbook, but a lot of the way these offenses are designed are so that the quarterback mechanics tie together with the offense, right? So like the left foot forward stuff and the rhythmic of the passing game in the West Coast offense that AVP runs, all of that is tied together to the routes so that they're tethered together. So his drop back is timed up with his reads and the routes. So now when you start to rewrite all of that, it starts to change in terms of like the timing of everything starts to change, the cadence, the timing, the drop back. So if McDaniels is coming here, it's going to change all of that stuff. So you're not really doing AVP's work anymore. You understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
With AVP, I guess like my question and I wrote this when I wrote my candidates before Reese took the Browns job, is like, would you hire a guy like Tommy Reese as the offensive coordinator and then try to convince Alex Van Pelt to stay on as like a senior offensive, like in the Ben McAdoo role, right? Like as like a senior offensive assistant, work with Drake May. You're still going to speak the West Coast language, so we're not changing playbooks necessarily. We're just bringing in a Tommy Reese to update and just kind of innovate the offense a little bit, liven up the scheme and the play design a little bit more. Is there a possibility, if you want to go that direction, of Clint Kubiak, Josh McCown, Nick Caley, Mike LaFleur, like coming in and being the tight pants guy with Alex Van Pelt on their staff? I think that would be more realistic. And just based off of what Vrabel has done in the past, being a West Coast offense basically all throughout Tennessee, his time with the Titans, that would make a lot of sense to me. Yep. You have to pitch Alex Van Pelt on it, right? I don't know how
that's
he feels.
It's just tough. If I'm in his shoes, what would I do? It's tough to say.
So he can't go back to Cleveland, or, you don't think that he can go back to Cleveland.
Right.
I'm sure he could go back to Cleveland as a position coach or something like that if he really wanted to, but that's sort of off the table. Where else would you, like, maybe back to Green Bay?
I guess.
Where else are you going?
You got to look at it in the track. I mean, just assuming that he wants to be a head coach, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what the majority of these guys want. And I know he's a little bit older. I don't think he's at the age where it's not like 70, right? And it's like, well, I'm going to be a coordinator. That's just it. What gets you closer to head coach? Is it because there's the image that the league is going to have if you take what might be a demotion here to go to quarterback's coach. If you go somewhere else and be a quarterback's coach, well, now you haven't directly taken a demotion, but you're going to have the same success elsewhere without Drake May. What quarterback are you going to be working with? Do you go out of the league and do you go do media for a year or two and then try to work your way back in that way? I feel bad for him because this is a second year in a row that he's kind of ended up where
been scapegoated.
He did I wouldn't say got scapegoated because the entire staff just got let go.
But he was scapegoated in Cleveland.
He was scapegoated in Cleveland, right?
Yeah.
And I was going to say this is the second year in a row, and he's been fired. He's been let go for different reasons. We think he's been let go. I guess I should say he's still technically employed, but if they go another direction, offensive coordinator, this is the second year in a row he's done a good job and lost his job.
Yeah.
So it's a really tough spot for him to be in. I would love to see them, the senior advisor thing, if it is going to be a West Coast offense, honestly, even if it's not, just to keep him in the building, just whatever he did last year, he clearly, his messaging worked for Drake May.
It worked for both quarterbacks.
For both quarterbacks, right.
Yeah.
It's not just the West Coast technique of it all. Like, he reached these guys.
Yeah.
And to just have him in the building as almost a translator for the quarterbacks or something like that, I would love to see them keep him around in that role. You mentioned the analytics stuff with Vrabel.
Oh, well, let's get to that.
Well, no. Just as kind of an aside, another thing that, you wonder if he took from that is a lot of those teams, the teams that preach analytics, they have big coaching staffs.
Yeah.
That's something they believe in. Is Vrabel going to be one of these guys? Even last year, it was a bigger staff than Bill. It was still one of the, I think it was about middle of the league in terms of the size of the coaching staff. It wasn't big. It wasn't small, but it wasn't big. Is Vrabel going to be a guy that's going to have a big coaching staff? Because, if you're trying to keep it limited and say, we don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, we want clear, defined, blah, 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 you're probably not going to do this with Van Pelt. If he's somebody coming in and saying, no, we're going to have the number of people in here that we need, to do this, then you maybe look at Van Pelt for a role like that. So it'll be really interesting. But one way or the other, even if it is McDaniels, I'd love to see them try to find a way to, even just in the short term, year or two, keep Alex Van Pelt in the building.
So, I guess we don't have to get bogged down by the semantics. Yeah. I don't think you need Alex Van Pelt if McDaniels is here. But if they do hire,
I don't think you need him, but I don't think it would be a bad thing to keep him around.
Yeah, I just worry. I just don't see how it. I don't see how it pertains. Like I know, like it's like an algebra course with a calculus teacher, right? Like you're teaching two different things. But regardless of that, that's like not here nor there so much. If they hire one of these guys, we don't say they don't hire McDaniels, and they're going to hire one of these up and comers like a Nick Caley, like a Josh McCown, like one of these types of people. I'm going to Alex Van Pelt and I'm saying, listen, we need to be a little bit more innovative on offense. We need to liven up the scheme. We need to be a little bit fresher in terms of what we're doing schematically and play design wise offensively, but we love the work that you did with Drake.
Yeah.
And we know that Drake likes you. He trusts you. So we want you to stay on to keep doing that type of stuff, basically be the quarterback's coach, more or less. And, Josh McCown's going to design the offense. He's going to call the plays. But you are going to help a lot with the quarterback.
Right.
And let's just keep that part of it rolling. I would have loved that with Tommy Reese too, but now that that's off the table, I'm with it. Like I think that with Nick Caley, I think is a really, really strong duo to do that. You have a quarterbacks guy in Alex Van Pelt that has experience with these quarterbacks and working with these quarterbacks, and you have Nick Caley to come in here and design the plays and run the offense and call the plays. I would be on board with that as well. If they're going to go the more inexperienced route, though, I need Van Pelt here. Like I need somebody like that I could sit here and say, okay, that guy has done it before with quarterbacks. He's been around the block. He knows what he's doing. I'm not handing Drake May a first-time everything. First-time quarterback guy, first-time play caller, first-time OC, and just by himself, I'm not doing that. But if Alex Van Pelt's here to be a guide along the way, then sure, I'm with that. You mentioned analytics. I do want to go back to that here in a second. But quickly before we take all the calls and everything, I don't think that there's a ton of it's not as interesting to talk about the defensive side of the ball and what's going to happen with this stuff.
When he got hired Sunday, I was on the radio with Matt McCarthy, and he was like, we did the whole offensive coordinator thing. Goes, who do you like for defensive coordinator? I was like, I honestly never thought of it. I was so focused on Ben Johnson defensive coordinators, I never thought of it.
Yeah, well, because honestly, it matters, of course.
It matters.
It doesn't matter.
I want it to be Mike Vrabel's defense.
Yeah, it will.
I want him to be in charge. Like Patrick Graham is the kind of layup name to say, right? But this was one of the big problems with Gerard Mayo was he wasn't doing enough on the day-to-day. He was trying to be a week-to-week coach, not a day-to-day coach, and you need a day-to-day coach, especially with a young team. I want Vrabel there on the sidelines with the whiteboard, in the huddle, like after the defense comes off. I want it to be his unit. Yeah. And maybe he's not calling the plays, but I want him to be the one that's handing the play sheet to the defense coordinator, right? And saying, this is what we worked on all week. I want him to be able to jump in on third downs and say, hey, I'm making this call, things like that. So, yeah, you're right. It's not. Honestly, special teams one's more interesting to me.
Of course it
is. Well, no, because.
Of course it is.
I thought they really made strides on special teams.
Well, Tom Quinn was
last
with
year.
him in Tennessee.
Right. So the question is, does he look at Tom Quinn and say, I'm making you my guy because we work together in Tennessee?
Yeah.
Or does Tom Quinn maybe go to him and say, hey, me and Springer, we had a good thing going last year. Let's just not, I'm fine being the assistant. Let's just not touch it.
Yeah.
Right? So, because we both said this at the end of the year, oddly enough, Springer was the one guy we sort of looked at and said, yeah, he's probably good. He should stay. So,
yeah, I think Tom Quinn was a big part of what they did.
Right.
He's
so
got a ton of experience.
I would love to see them run it back on special teams.
Yeah, I'd be more or less okay with that.
Yeah.
A defensive coordinator. I'm a big fan of Lou Anarumo's. So if they went after Big Lou, I would be all for it. But that's his defense, right?
Don't you think? So yeah, don't you think Lou Anarumo is going to want to go somewhere where he's the head coach of the defense kind of thing?
I would imagine so, but there's a lot of overlap between what the Patriots and what the Titans and what the Bengals have done schematically from a defensive perspective. I'd actually think that would work in terms of those two systems coming together. But I just think he's a great coach. Right?
Don't get me wrong. I do too. I would take him 100%. I would take him. But if I'm him, I'm looking I want to go somewhere where it's clearly my show on defense because does he still want to be a head coach, right?
You're right.
I want to go somewhere where it's clearly my show on defense, where there's I'm not answering to anybody in that regard. And then so that way in a year or two, I can get a head coach. If he's here, there's always going to be the question, and everybody knows what a great coach he is, but isn't there always going to kind of be that? Well, is it Anarumo or is it Vrabel?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So
Yep.
I don't know. I don't see what the draw is. And there's not a lot of talent here for him to work with. And he just dealt with that. And that's why he got fired in Cincinnati, because there's a talent drain on the defense. It's not because he was doing a bad job. So what's the draw for him to come here?
That's fair.
Right? Don't get me. I'd love to talk to him.
I just
Vrabel.
think his name has to be mentioned because he's a great coordinator.
Fair. But if I'm him, I'm like, yeah, I got 5 other interviews. I'm good.
I would say Patrick Graham is in the same category. I think
You think so?
Yeah, I think Patrick Graham is a guy that.
Well, he at least has the familiarity with Vrabel, I guess.
Yeah, but he's getting head coaching interviews this cycle already.
Is he? Oh, I didn't see
Yeah,
that. Okay.
and so I would imagine that he's another one of those guys that wants ownership of the defense so that he can flex, that he's running that side of the ball when it comes to interviews in the future. So, Shane Bowen is his guy from Tennessee. He's with the Giants right now. It sounds like he's going to stay with the Giants, at least for the time being. So I find those ones interesting just a little bit, though, because if you're, and the other name I'd put in this category is a more experienced guy. Jim Schwartz has like a long relationship with Vrabel, going back to being on his staff in Tennessee as a senior advisor,
that would be,
and all that type of stuff. So
I think Jimmy Stewart threw that name out this week.
Yeah, Jim Schwartz and Shane Bowen, just putting those two names together for a second. If you go to those two guys, if you're Vrabel, and I understand that he's got a relationship probably with Dable and Kevin Stefanski, so you have to be careful how you phrase this, but what are the odds that they're sitting here next year without jobs because their 2 head coaches just got blown out in New York and in Cleveland? Pretty high.
Yeah.
It's pretty high that job in Cleveland and that job with the Giants does not have a whole lot of staying power. Vrabel's getting multiple years to try to fix this here.
Right.
They just one and done to coach. It's not happening again. So he's getting multiple chances from the Crafts to build this here. So if you're Shane Bowen and you can go next year with the Giants, have all the same issues you just had last year that was not a very good football team, just like the Patriots, and then potentially run the risk of getting fired in a year when Dable gets blown out if they stink again. Then you could come here. You probably have 2 or 3 years of job security here, at the very least.
Yeah.
And maybe a decade if it goes well, right? So
at that point, you hope you get hired away as a head coach.
Yeah. So that would just be a pitch I would maybe try to make. Bowen is, an intense guy, fired up guy. You can see him on Hard Knocks. He's like one of those types of coaches, right? He's going to make you want to run through a brick wall. Jim Schwartz is a mastermind. He's an experienced mastermind, awesome pressure coach, like great at scheming up pressure and designing pressure. He's one of the best in the league on the defense side of the ball. Like I said, he's been with Vrabel in Tennessee. I think it was for maybe 2 years as a senior advisor on the defensive side of the ball on that staff. I would just pitch them. And then there's some other names that are some of the up-and-coming guys, like kind of like the tight pants equivalent on the defensive side of the ball, that if it is truly going to be Vrabel's defense, that maybe he develops a coach instead. Like, I think Vrabel, not that just as an example, but like if Vrabel was with DeMarcus Covington last year, like that might have worked out better, right? When you have like a more experienced head coach that is running the defense side of the ball, done it before, whatever, that type of guy. So there's some names out there. I'm going to butcher this one name, so I apologize in advance. Ephraim Banda, who is on the head coaching track. He's one name. Brandon Lynch, Chris Harris, a couple of other names there on the defense side of the ball that have connections to Vrabel that could potentially come over. Terrell Williams and Deshaun Townsend are the 2 guys in Detroit. Yeah, one of those guys I would assume is going to take over for Aaron Glenn when he gets a job this cycle. But maybe the other guy that doesn't get it is going to be out, and maybe he's going to be looking for a job. So those would be the guys that I would throw out as like, okay, that's the tight pants equivalent on defense. Vrabel's really going to be the guy that's running the defense, but we're going to train this guy to maybe take on more responsibility as we go here. But yeah, I'm not as interested in that side of the ball. But there's a couple names on that side, coaching-wise. Mike Pellegrino. I think that we would both be interested in retaining him.
Absolutely. And UNC just hired the cornerbacks coach from
Washington,
who's like, he's one of the bigger names coming up on that side of the ball in college. So I don't know. Maybe there's still a job for Pellegrino there with Bill, but defensive backs coach is taken.
Yeah. So, I think that's a possibility that he goes younger on the defense side of the ball and tries to train that guy up. Last thing here, and then we'll do the second hour. We'll do some draft. We'll do some whatever your phones and emails you guys want to talk about. I do want to talk about the analytics thing for a second because we got it. I got to scratch this itch. I was so encouraged by what I heard from Vrabel in terms of applying analytics to personnel. I'm with you, not 100%. It might catch some people by surprise that I am not in love with the fourth down decision-making route in terms of analytics. I don't want to just follow the math when it comes to those types of decisions. I'm not like that. People misunderstand me. I'm not with that because I do hear the Bill argument of, well, what's the situation?
Right.
Who are you playing? What's the weather? What's the flow of the game?
I've been saying this for years. I've been telling you this for years.
Yeah, I've never disagreed with you on this. You just think
I think it applies to more than just fourth downs.
Yeah, you misunderstand me. What I am very, very encouraged by was his answer to WEI yesterday about how they were going to apply analytics to player personnel, to scouting, to talent evaluation. So when we talk about that side of the street, we're talking about in-game tracking data. The chips in the pads that track miles per hour and acceleration and the ability to transition, whether you're a receiver at the top of the route or a DB mirroring a receiver at the top of the route, top speed, average speed, all those different types of things. The teams that are winning in the NFL are all using this data. They're all using this data to evaluate talent and to evaluate players in the draft and even in pro personnel and free agency. The Chiefs, the Bills, the Eagles, the Lions, like these teams are all at Rams are all at the forefront of doing all these things. The Patriots are way, way behind because when they had Bill Belichick, it was all just in Bill's mind, right? And he had that ability because he's special, but not everybody does.
Most people don't.
So the Patriots need to update this part of their football operations. They need to come up to the 2025 way of doing things. And the Rams, to me, are the perfect example because I'll look it up in a second when I pass it to you. The analytics guy for ESPN, he releases a list every single year of all the analytics departments across the league and who's staffed and who, how many people they do staff. The Rams have 2 people on staff that are their chief analytics guys. So it's not like it's this 10-person staff like it is in Cleveland. It's just 2 people. But the Rams don't even go to the combine. They don't even go to the combine because they don't waste their time with the 40 anymore or with the short shuttle or the 3-cone or anything like that. They do the interview side and the medical side, but they don't pay any attention whatsoever to the on-field stuff. So I'll give you a couple of examples where it worked out. Puka Nacua is the big one.
That's the big one, yes. Everybody points to.
So Puka Nacua is the big one. But I would also say Kyron Williams, their running back, is another one who did bomb the combine, but is a great football athlete, is a great football player, and a guy that you loved, Cam Kinchins.
That's right, still do.
Yeah.
Good football player. But he ran a 4.40. Why do you want him so bad?
So those are the 3 kind of skill position guys, and this is mostly what we're talking about, right? Is the skill positions. But Puka Nacua is the big one, and there's actually a clip of Sean McVay and Les Snead talking about Puka Nacua, and Les Snead says, if I sort the spreadsheet by my top speeds, then he's one of the fastest receivers in the draft. And Puka Nacua ran like a 4.5 something and wasn't a good time speed guy. And then you get into the game and you can see how good he is and how athletic he is. And he's plenty fast enough to win at the NFL level. So the Rams are kind of the poster child for it right now because of these clips, from their behind the scenes stuff. But all these teams that are at the top of the top that are scouting at the best across the league, they're all using this data. They're all using analytics. And the example that I would give is for us,
Yeah.
we want to make good content, right? We want to
Right.
make content that we think is good. We want to make content that we think is interesting to people. But we also have to answer to engagement, clicks, numbers. Like, that's just our business, right? Because that's the tangible evidence of what you're doing is working, is
Right.
that type of thing. That's what analytics are in football. You still want to, the film's still king, and you
Yeah.
still want to make the pretty picture. But when it comes to what's tangible evidence that we can point to that this is successful and this is working, that's where the analytics come into mind. And if they're going to bring a lot of that analytics stuff to the Patriots personnel in their scouting process, all the power, like, thank you, Mike Vrabel. Please do that. And hopefully maybe he poaches some guys from Cleveland to come do it for him.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is where probably everybody expects me to go yell and scream about the math. I'll say this. One, and I always say this about the draft. The Senior Bowl holds weight, especially for guys from smaller schools, but, like, the combine should never outweigh what the player did for 4 months from September to December.
Right.
Right? Like, at the end of the day, you're drafting these guys, you're hiring these guys to play football. What do they look like as football players? So if a guy runs bad 40, this is what I kind of kept saying about Cam Kitchens last year. It's not great. It factors into my evaluation. But I saw that guy for 12 games patrol the back end of the defense for Miami, and I know what he can do. I know how he can cover ground on a football field. He had a bad day. Like, he ran a bad 40. He gets one shot to prove how fast he is for his entire career. I've always thought that's ridiculous. I do still think there's value in going to the combine because I think that, and this is where the math kind of loses it, how are guys operating in between the drills? How are guys, interacting with each other? How are they getting themselves ready immediately before the drill? How do they react after the drill? Like, I think you learn about the person that way. I still think teams should go to the combine. I still think there's value in that.
Agreed.
I think the Rams are missing something there. What I will say when it comes to the analytics, and where I liked Vrabel's answer, I've always said I like the tangible numbers, right? I like the numbers that actually mean something, define something. You can point to me and say, there is that in action. A guy running 20 miles an hour is relevant. That is a tangible number. I am all on board for that, and it's a good way to cross-check. Oh, wait, this guy ran a bad 40. Let's go look at, what he was doing with pads on in the season and see if it reflects that. I think the same is true on the flip side. Oh, this guy ran a great 40, but his numbers aren't as good in games, so he's track speed, but he's not really fast as a football player. It's, I think, kind of what happened with Tyquan Thornton.
Yeah.
So that, like, player tracking stuff, I'm all for. If they start using DVOA and EPA and all that, now you've lost me. Now you've lost me, right? War and all of that.
As much as I love all that kind of stuff, NFL teams are not looking at that kind of stuff.
But if you're just telling me, hey, we want to actually see how fast this player ran on the field, right? Yeah, they should be using that data because Bill Belichick could do that. There's many reasons Bill Belichick was the greatest coach of all time. But he could just, one of them is, I think he could just look at the film and sort of just know.
Yeah.
And I've always said that, oh, Bill used analytics. I think a lot of the stuff that people have to use analytics to find out were just common sense for Bill. So he might have been taking an analytical approach, but his brain was just a freaking supercomputer.
Yeah, so
right?
he also used analytics more for, like, value-based stuff in terms of paying people, like free agents and things like that. A lot of his analytics and what him and Ernie Adams put together, besides the, like, charting plays and personnel groupings and formations and things like that. That's like sort of a separate category. But then, in terms of the actual data side of it, they had models in terms of like, this is what we think this player is worth, right? Like,
No, but I'm saying,
we think
like,
he's worth 10, but he's getting 12 on the open market. And like, how close are we going to get to that? That's where they didn't necessarily use like Zebra Tech and Next Gen and like all that kind of stuff.
Right. Well, but I'm more so saying, like, I wrote this a couple years ago, like Patriots draft picks had bad combines. Braden Spikes had like a really bad combine. But he was like I think he was like the worst testing linebacker that year across the board. Or he was at a couple of drills. Bill looked at him and said, nope, I've seen it on tape. That guy can play football. I'll take him. I think there's some, not all. Like, there's no other Bill Belichick's. Everybody has to look at that now, and they need the data to help them figure it out. So if they're going to be using, like, player acquisition tracking data, I don't consider that analytics. To me, analytics is like the Bill James Moneyball stuff with WAR and these expected this and things like that, EPOA, DVOA, like you're never going to sell me on that. You will never sell me on that. That's what I consider analytics. Just looking at how fast a player runs because he's a chip in his shoulder, I guess it is technically analytics, but to me it's like, no, that's just fact finding.
Yeah, I like to call that, like, I hear what you're saying.
It's player tracking.
It's player tracking.
Right.
But it's obviously, it's organized. The data is organized by the analytics departments of these football teams.
I guess on a technicality, it's all right. So let me say this.
We don't need to get bogged down.
If it's analytics, it's analytics.
Yep.
It's not the math. That is not what I would consider the math.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. Yeah. We don't need to argue about the math for the 17th, 100th time of our lives, but
sounds like we're not going to have to, which is good.
I just look at it as they have all this data, they have all this stuff that's available to them that they're openly, willingly choosing to ignore. And all these other teams that are winning and are having success, and don't get me wrong, like I'm not saying that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are successful because of analytics, right? Like that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But a lot of what they're doing in Kansas City is analytically driven in terms of finding the fringe guys to help and supplement Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce.
He's winning on the margins.
And Chris Jones and so
which is what Vrabel's all about. It's used as a dirty term. Like, oh, Vrabel, get ready to win on the margins.
Yeah.
All I heard is get ready to win. I'm good with that. I don't really care how. I don't care if they win every game by 1 or win every game by 40. If they win every game, 40. I'm happy.
So the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to this analytics thing was the conversation that's going around Twitter. You got clipped. You got one already. You do 17 different media things. You're about to get clipped, and all the nerds, all of my people, my brethren, are piling on him a little bit because he dropped the stat of like teams that rush it more than 40 times or 155 and 2 or whatever, and that's causation, correlation, like whatever, nerd, okay, whatever, but. What I look at when it comes to the run game, and this is where I think you misunderstand me again. I'm not anti-running the football. I'm anti-running back, but I'm not anti-running the football. But if you're going to run the football, you're running with a purpose, right? So I'm running for two things. I'm running for explosives, and I'm running to set up play action.
You need to make sure you have an explosive running back to run for explosives.
So that's what I'm doing. I'm not one of these people that will ever believe and we need to establish the run, and we need to set a tone, and we need to be the more physical team.
But isn't that running with a purpose?
No. Running with the purpose to me is you're running to set up things. You're running to hit bigger plays off of play action. You are running to, make explosives in the run game on its own. You are running the football late in games because you have a 2-score lead and you're trying to milk clock. Like that is effective, efficient running. If you go into football games and you think that if we run it 40 times today, we are going to win, that's antiquated, right? Like you're looking at it backwards. So the good teams, because I know you're going to mention it, but the good teams like Detroit, like Baltimore, like Philadelphia, that are run-first teams, are highly, highly efficient passing teams.
Well, didn't Vrabel say we have to be an efficient passing team?
The reason why they're so efficient passing the ball, though, is because a lot of what they do in the pass game branches off of their run game. So that's where the hand-in-hand goes together. I understand that he kind of got finger-wagged for the stat that he dropped, but I actually understood the bigger picture conversation that he was trying to have. Maybe we look at it slightly differently from there, but I'm not like totally anti it, what he said. I just hope that the point of the run game for him should be to set up the pass game and to close out games.
Well, why can't it be both? Why can't it be to set up the fast pass game and establish some sort of physicality?
Because establishing the physicality is not going to win you jack.
But if you
it's
come
not
out,
going to win you anything.
If you come out early and you run the ball and you put body blows into that defensive front, it's going to get a lot harder for them to rush the quarterback.
Based off of what?
Because you're physically wearing them down.
No, there's no proof or evidence of that. There's no proof or evidence that any of that has an effect on that. Now, what does have an effect is I said to him that my favorite run play was power, right? So if you come into the game and you run power and you pull the guard through and you get him up on the second level, and now all of a sudden those linebackers and those safeties have to respect the pull, and now you false pull them and then you hit the play action behind it, That's going to help.
You don't think it's a little bit harder to chase Lamar Jackson around the backfield after Derrick Henry just put his shoulder in your chest a play or two before?
I'm sure it is.
Don't think you're feeling that?
I've never been there, so I'm not going to sit here and act like it isn't.
Look, I've never been there, but you see how defensive linemen react when team runs the ball a couple times in a row. They look kind of gassed. They start getting a little banged up. Maybe you have team subbing, but now you're getting good players off the field. So I think you can do, and maybe that is, in a sense, that is running to set up the pass. So I guess it's not counter to you, but like when I hear that stat, right? That what is it? It's like if you throw more than 45 times in a game, quarterbacks win 20% of the time outside Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Right. And then the inverse of that, like 155-2 when you run X number of times. I think if you go into a game planning to run the ball 40 times, you're kidding yourself. I think if you go into a game outside of very, very specific examples, right? The wind game in Buffalo or 2014 against Baltimore when they came out in the second half, just like we're not going to run the ball, right? Outside of very, very specific matchup examples, if you come into a game planning to throw the ball 40 times, you're kidding yourself. If you come into a game planning to run the ball 40 times, you're kidding yourself. The best offenses do both. The best offenses are balanced. I don't think you can win in this league, however good that one dimension is. I don't think it's possible to win in this league at a high level as a one-dimensional offense. There may be games here or there. Maybe you realize after one quarter, hey, we can't run the ball on these guys. We're going to have to throw it 40 times. Or you go into a game and you realize, hey, the conditions suck for throwing. We're going to have to run this thing the rest of the way and get there. Like that might happen in moments as in-game adjustments. But if you go into a game planning to be so heavy one way or so heavy the other, you go into a season planning to be so heavy one way or so heavy the other, you're kidding yourself. It's not going to work. Ideally, like you'd love to end every game running the football 5-10 times in a row because it means you're up a couple scores. You're trying to run the clock out.
Right.
So if you end up running the ball 40 times, like it might happen, or maybe you fall behind early and you have to make a comeback.
Thing, right? Like you run, like the reason why teams have such a great record when they run it 40 times is because they're winning.
And you're nuts if you don't think Mike Vrabel understands that.
No, I think he understands that.
I know not the people on the internet think he doesn't understand it, and those people are idiots.
Because he just fell into like a little coach speak thing. It's not that big of a deal.
Well, those people claim to know football, but their nose is too deep in Microsoft Excel. My point being,
oh my god, when you sit there and you say these things, it's just the self-awareness.
You know exactly who I'm talking about.
I know you're talking about, but you're saying it like somebody that is 250
I do not use Microsoft Excel. What?
Like you're saying it like you're Dan Campbell. Like you have to realize that
as somebody
like,
who doesn't use Microsoft Excel, I think I can talk about not using Microsoft Excel.
Okay,
I think that's perfectly fair.
Just keep going.
The point being, what I got from Vrabel was they're not going to be a one-dimensional offense.
Agreed.
And that's good because I think a lot of people wanted them to be a one-dimensional offense. I think a lot of people wanted them to be, we're going to come out and Drake May's going to throw it all over the yard and our runs are either going to be designed quarterback runs or him scrambling. And that's not what it's going to be. There is still going to be a place for running the football, traditionally running the football. It's going to be I don't know if significance is the right word, but like a major part of the offense. It'll be as much a part of the offense as throwing the football. Good. I don't want to see them become one-dimensional. That's how you fail. You can't be one-dimensional in the modern. And the same thing applies defensively too. But like you can't be one-dimensional in the modern NFL. It's
just if you're going to be a run-first team, if you're going to be like the Detroit Lions, like the Baltimore Ravens, like the Philadelphia Eagles, and you're truly going to be a run-first football team, you have to, when you do pass, you have to be damn good at passing.
And what did Mike Vrabel say? We have to be an effective passing team.
Yeah. So that's it, right? Like if the Lions are 27th in the league in early down pass rate.
Yeah.
27th. They run the ball a ton.
Works.
They run the ball a ton. But they're such a good passing game when they have to go to their passing game. And so we both agree with the same philosophy. You pass to score, you run to win, right? And if the Patriots still adhere to that and they get to 40 carries because they're up a score or two late in the game and they're just, running it to milk the clock and close out games, great. Like that's exactly where you want to be as a team. If you think that you're going to get to that point where you're running clock late in games because you have a lead by running the ball and setting the tone and establishing a run and being more physical and all that kind of stuff, you're going to be 4-13. You're going to be the Patriots of 2024.
I think there's more to the physicality element than you're letting on.
Yeah, we disagree on that part.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Football is a physical game. I guess that's a hot take.
Yeah, but why does the physicality of the game only pertain to running the football?
Why? Because stopping the run is a much more physically demanding task for the front.
I would say pass blocking is also physical. Like you're passing.
Well, no.
Pass blocking is not passive. Like you got to go and be aggressive.
Pass blocking is not. That's not what I said. I said stopping the run is much more physically demanding for the defensive front. Is the offense, you're trying to wear out the defensive front. And to your point,
you think that but like, isn't it physically demanding in a different way? Like, isn't chasing around the quarterback or trying to get off the ball and get around the edge? Like, that's just it's just more like explosively taxing.
You're not taking like the physical body blows.
Yeah, but you see all the time, like you see pass rushers like wear out as games wear on because they have been trying to tee off.
I think that's more of a gradual thing. Whereas, like if you really punch the other team in the mouth up front. You look at the 13-play all-run drive from the Ravens, right? Those guys, about 8 plays in, that Steelers defense was tapped out.
Okay, but how about, like if you got a receiver like A.J. Brown or a receiver, Dallas Goedert on Sunday when he's stiff-arming dudes, like that's also physically hard. Like to tackle a guy in the open
secondary
field.
Now. It's all physically tough. Like it's all football.
Right, exactly. So why does it just apply to the run game? Like why is it just hard to stop the run?
Because if you run the ball a few times, now those guys are gassed more so than I think in the pass game, especially early on, right? I'm not talking about, yes, if you throw the ball a bunch, the pass rushers get worn out in the fourth quarter. That's what happened 28-3. You run the ball a couple times early on. Now those defenders are gassed. It's part of setting up the pass. Like to your point, it's part of how the run game sets up the pass. Like these guys are now because they're trying to tackle, they're trying to fight through double teams, they're getting knocked on their ass, things like that.
It's a really good way to keep the score down.
I don't care if they win 13-6 if they win.
But you have to care about that because they have to be able to play a different way. They went all year last year without scoring 30 points.
Did I not just say you cannot be one-dimensional?
Yeah, but you have to be in this league. You are going to have to outscore people.
Yes.
If they're going to try to win games 17-14, that is a problem. They can't win that way. They basically have tried to win that way 3 years in a row.
But I'm not saying come out and run the ball 40 times. That's what I'm saying you should not do. You should not plan going into the game. If you end up running it 40 times,
all you're doing by running the ball early on in games is shortening the game. That's all you're doing.
Well, that's something that I'm actually big on, personally.
Exactly, and that's the problem. They've been trying to do that for 3 straight years.
I think even if you're a good team, shortening the team is good. Shortening the game is good. But there's something to be said about establishing the physicality, setting a tone, getting in a rhythm. We hear linemen talk about that all the time, too, right? Getting in a rhythm. You hit a couple big runs. You hit a couple solid runs. Now the line's feeling it. Now, the defense is kind of back on their heels. And again, it's that mentality. Now, when you want to throw the ball, you have established that advantage up front. And maybe that buys you more time in the pass game. Or it gets guys cheating a little more on play action or things like that. This is, you say you want to run to set up the pass, right?
Yes.
What does that look like? That's not just doing it to do it. There's something that actually happens when you run to set up the pass. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but I don't think, it's not a volume thing to me, right? It's a looks thing to me.
I'm not talking about volume.
Right, but you are, though, because if you're talking about shortening games and things like that, you're talking about volume.
Evan, I'm talking about, like, in your opening 10-play script.
Yes.
Have 3 or 4 good punch-them-in-the-mouth runs in there. That's what I'm talking about, essentially.
Okay, but that's different than saying we need to establish the run.
I think that's establishing the run.
By having 3 or 4 runs in a 20-play script?
If I said 10 plays. And if you hit them well, if you execute them well, yeah, you can. I think if you watch the playoff games last weekend, a couple big plays early, not even like explosive, but just like
but I would argue in a lot of those playoff games, especially Buffalo, I would say like
Buffalo's just so much more talented than Denver,
right? But it took them until the second half to start to blow out Denver because of how they were playing in the first half. Like I would say a lot of those games were closer than they should have been. Like, I think Green Bay was closer than it should have been,
I think Buffalo was just rusty because they didn't play last week, essentially. Like, I think that was just
I think Buffalo ran the ball
complacency.
way too much in the first half of that game.
What's not to say that them running the ball in the first half would allow them to pull away because they ran out the Denver defensive front.
There's just no tangible evidence.
But it's human beings playing the sport. It's human
because
nature.
You're just saying that like that's like you're saying that's like your gut thing just says that's true. Like if Buffalo had come out in that game, like Denver could not score with Buffalo. Denver could not score with Buffalo. So if you just came out of that game and you threw the ball like they did when the Patriots went down, to Buffalo in 2021.
Well, I also just think they were rusty. I also just think that Buffalo was rusty. But like, you look at the body language right after that 13-play drive by the Ravens. The Steelers never mentally recovered from that. And I think it's because they're getting pushed around. And when you get knocked around a couple times, it's going to be hard to come back up with that same level of confidence. On the flip side, if you're an offensive lineman, you just knock these guys around 3 or 4 times in the first 10 plays, you're going to be looking at each other like, oh, we're feeling it today. Here we go. It's mental. It's mental as much as it is physical. But there is that physical demandingness that comes with it. I don't think that's that crazy of a take.
It's not.
Right?
It's an antiquated take. It's not a crazy take.
How often do we talk about? Oh, the offensive line is feeling it, right? The offensive line's going downhill.
They're having success. So now
I can't give you a math number.
Exactly.
But this game has been played for a long time, and when you look at teams start to run the football early, and I'm not talking about calling 8 runs on your first 10 plays. I'm talking about when you get an offensive
I knew this
line
would get them fired up.
When you get an offensive line going early,
yeah,
right? That generally kind of carries through.
Okay.
So what a better way
to
get an offensive line going than running early? That's all I'm saying.
Do you know who has confidence, Alex? Mike Vrabel has confidence, and it's important to have when you're on the road with Bridgestone tires on your car, truck, SUV, or minivan. You're riding on tires you can trust. Bridgestone tires are engineered to give you peace of mind so you can focus on enjoying the journey. So whether you're on your morning commute, a cross-country road trip, or a relaxing Sunday drive, Bridgestone tires will be with you wherever life's roads may lead. Bridgestone, solutions for your journey, available now at Sullivan Tire. And designing for a small space at Bob's Discount Furniture, don't have to sacrifice style or storage when working with a small footprint. Not only does Bob's have feature-packed, small space-friendly pieces for every room, taste, and square footage, but they're also budget friendly. Now that's multitasking. So stop in and stock up at Bob's Discount Furniture, the official furniture store of the New England Patriots. Let's get to the phones. I know you guys have been waiting. We appreciate it. Patty is in Agawam. What's up, Patty?
What's up, Jen?
How are we doing?
So, doing all right. So I got kind of a convoluted question, but bear with me. So if indeed Josh McDaniels is the next offensive coordinator, can you kind of see them sticking to some of the gap runs? And the reason why I ask is my favorite tackle coming out this year is actually Josh Connerly. Evan, I can't wait for you to watch film on this guy. He's, but to me, I think he's more adept to play in that zone style, whereas like Banks might be able to, bridge both styles because, he's kind of a monster, but Connerly's a really good athlete, and from everything that I've heard, he's 20, he just turned 21 years old. They don't think that he's hit his physical, he hasn't hit his physical peak yet, but he's only been playing on the line for a few years because he was a running back and basketball player. So I just want to know, if they don't run any of those gap schemes, could you see him as a fit in the system?
Yeah, thanks for the call, Patty. So
thanks for the call.
In terms of Connerly, I have
watched Connerly.
Yeah,
right?
I've seen a little bit of Connerly from the championship game, which was Big Ten championship. What freaking conference is Oregon in at this point? Big Ten championship game.
Now, let me check. I guess I should check and update the way things are going.
Right.
As of this morning,
he's a very athletic guy, very toolsy. Still young, still raw, like Patty talked about. Probably not a traditional gap run tackle. Yeah. He's more of a high level pass protector.
A little more agile.
A little bit more athletic, but that's what you're looking for on the blind side. With Connerly, just starting there, I wonder how high his ceiling is in terms of where he goes in the draft. With a draft that has some question marks with certain tackles, are they guards or whatever, he could go high. He could be somebody that sneaks up into the late teens, early 20s, I would say, just based off the fact that he's got all the traits. He's got some good film against some good competition, late in the season for Oregon. So I just worry about is he going to sort of be in that no man's land for the Patriots who have 4-38? How do you bridge the gap if he goes 20? You're not going to be in the range for him.
Well, that's where trading down comes in. It'll be interesting. Him, Ariante Ursary another guy who are kind of in that same range. Good player, yeah. But yeah, it's going to kind of be about where do they land him. I still am in the camp of trade down, especially. I don't know if you saw Dane Brugler's mock draft today.
Yeah, didn't love it.
I said this on.
And I like Dane, by the way. I'm not.
I do too. I didn't love it for the Patriots. That's not actually the point I wanted to make. I said this the other night on Twitter. and I think it's something we're going to need to talk about quite a bit. His top three were Cam Ward. I think this is in order, if I have it correctly. Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, and Travis Hunter. So, like, yeah. I don't think the conversation is Abdul Carter the best player on the... Is Abdul Carter the right player for the Patriots at 4? I think the real question is Abdul Carter going to be on the board at 4 for the Patriots? And, I asked that, and a lot of people said, well, you draft Travis Hunter. I don't think... I think that there's a chance that you only have one quarterback go in the top 3, and it's Carter and Hunter with him. So now those two guys are off the board. So now what do you do? Do you take Tet McMillan at 4? Do you take Kelvin Banks or Will Campbell at 4? Do you take Mason Graham? I still think moving down makes the most sense, and maybe that's how you bridge the gap. Do you move from 4 to 6? I don't know, Evan. You tell me if this is an overpay by the Raiders. Do you move from 4 to 6 and then get 37? And that's the whole trade. And you don't get the future first, which would kind of suck. But you don't have a ton of leverage in a 2-quarterback draft. But now you have 37 and 38 in the second round. And you can do a lot with that. And you could package those two and probably get back up into the top 20. Right around 20. So let's call 22 to split the difference. Would you rather pick... And if you don't think if you don't think the Raiders would do it, feel free to say that. But would you rather pick at 4 and 38, where you still maybe have a chance at Carter? Or would you now you have no chance at Carter, but you're now picking at like 6 and 22?
Yeah. I don't know if the Raiders would do that. I think it would Matt, you tell me that these quarterbacks are going to go higher than I think. So I guess if the Raiders are worried that somebody from behind them is going to jump them for Shedeur Sanders, and they want to make sure they have him signed, sealed, delivered by moving up to 4, like I could see a trade like that happening. I would probably rather pick twice in the first round in this type of class. I feel like there's going to be some guys in the 20s in this draft that are going to be really interesting players that probably aren't surefire blue chip and top of the line prospects, but have those types of traits.
Like Connerly.
Josh Simmons, who I know you're lukewarm on, but if he's your second pick in the draft and other things happen in free agency,
I think
some of the receivers, Emeka Ibuka, Matthew
Burden.
Golden, Luther Burden, like those types of guys, I don't think those guys are top 10 players in a draft, but you pick, Luther Burden at 22, like that makes sense. That's right where the Zay Flowers JSN group went a couple years ago. That I can get on board with, and I do think that helps you a lot, whereas when you wait all the way to 38 to make your second pick in this draft, I think there's a pretty significant drop-off because it's not a great top of the draft. The drop-off there comes quick, and I think it's going to come hard for a lot of teams. So if you're really looking for a guy that can make a day one impact, you're probably going to have to move up from 38 to get that guy.
So moving down from 4 to then move up.
Yeah.
I don't think... Especially if Carter's not there at 4. If Carter and Hunter are not there at 4. I don't know that are Will Campbell and Calvin Banks going... Well, they're not going... 4, you're trading for a quarterback. So you're going to lose one guy at 5. Now you're on the board at 6. Now you're in great shape. So I still think trading back makes the most sense.
Yeah. To the gap scheme question... If they hire McDaniels, they're going to run gap. Like that's always what he's done. That's all outside zone's obviously in his playbook and it's in his arsenal. But if they hire McDaniels,
what isn't in McDaniels' playbook?
Yeah, well, that's McDaniels' playbook. Is that it's literally everything. If they're going to hire McDaniels, they're going to run downhill at teams. They're going to run gap. They're going to run power. They're going to run counter. They're going to run ISO. Lead, fullback, dive, whatever you want to call it. They're going to run. They're going to run all that type of stuff. They're going to get downhill. If they go with one of these West Coast guys, then they're probably going to stick to what Vrabel did in Tennessee and run some outside zone and be a wide zone team, which is okay too. Like it doesn't really matter. Now, assuming that it's not college, they're not going into the portal and turning over the entire roster most likely. So assuming that they still have some of the same pieces, I do still believe that their personnel fits a gap scheme better. Like, I still would rather see Mike Onwenu in a gap scheme. I
Right.
still would rather see Layden Robinson if he's a guy that has potential to start down the line. Caden Wallace, if he has potential to start down the line. I would still rather see those guys in a gap scheme. So I like the idea of that better. But if you're telling me that they're going to completely retool the entire offensive line and get more athletic and get leaner and get all that type of stuff, then okay, then you can go back to the zone scheme. But in Tennessee, they had to do that. LaFleur kind of started it. Arthur Smith kind of finished it off. They changed how they evaluated the line, and they didn't draft big 350-pound guards.
Right.
So that's a whole philosophical shift. They could get there. It's possible that you could get there, but that would take time. That's more than one off season, I would think, to make that sort of thing happen. All right. Cole is in Minnesota. What's up, Cole?
Hey.
How we doing, Cole?
Hey, so I'm pretty excited about the Vrabel hire, obviously, just like everybody else. And I kind of agree with Evan. Obviously, I think as far as an experienced offensive coordinator goes, Josh McDaniels, pretty easy pick, it feels like. The only thing that I'm worried about, like even with Bill at the height of the Patriots, he still had guys around him that weren't necessarily yes men. Ernie Adams, who could at least butt heads with him and challenge his way of thinking. So I'm just hoping that, obviously Vrabel's a pretty strongly opinionated guy. He's passionate. So I feel like it's important to find a guy that, doesn't have soft skin, just isn't going to be a yes man and can challenge his way of thinking as well.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thanks,
Did
Cole.
he say something in the press conference where he's like, we don't all want to be, I don't want everybody to be on the same page or something like that?
Yeah, you definitely want people to challenge you.
Right. It hit everybody weird. It's like, why doesn't he want everybody on the same page? I took that to mean like, I don't want yes men. Like, you're going to get on the same page eventually, but, differentiating of ideas, things like that. That's where somebody like Ryan Cowden, you look at him and it's all right. He's been with Vrabel before. They have a working relationship and you look for him to be that guy. Elliot Wolf, comes from a different background, can maybe be that guy and push back a little bit. I'm not super worried about Vrabel insulating himself. He just doesn't seem like that kind of guy.
Yeah, I'm not super worried about it either, and I think there will be guys that have differing opinions on this staff, and probably are on every single staff.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing is when we talk about personnel and we talk about this type of stuff is, do you need to really identify, and I think that they didn't really have the time to do this with Gerard, but you really need to identify like what is a Patriot player, like what is. I'm not talking about the intangibles. I'm talking about skill sets. Like what is a Patriot wide receiver? What is a Patriot running back? What's a Patriot tackle? And if you can stick to the archetypes of the guys that you're searching for, then it becomes like a well-oiled machine.
That's what I'm talking about last week with the program. That's
Right.
part of the program.
Right.
These are the kind of players we want, and now it makes things a lot easier because you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's
And
obviously,
I don't expect them to know that right now. Like, you need to know who your coordinators are
Yeah.
before you're going to do that. But
it's obviously low-hanging fruit, but like just to look at, the slot receiver, for example, in the Patriots' old way of doing things, they knew that the Troy Brown, Deion Branch, Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, Danny Amendola, like they knew what to look for to get that guy. And so they were not only able to continually pass the torch and get that guy, they were also able to get it later in the draft. Like they never had to reach on that guy in like the first or the second round because they knew the exact type of player that they were looking for, and they could find that player. Like Welker, is a sign and trade situation as an RFA. Edelman's obviously a well-known 7th round pick quarterback at the college level. Jacoby Myers is an undrafted rookie free agent, right? Like, so you were able to do these types of things, and I think that's big.
I'll give you another one that's a little less obvious. I'm trying to remember where this tree starts because obviously he's not like Teddy Bruschi, but you go from a Landon Roberts to Juwan Bentley, right? That kind of linebacker. I'm trying to remember who that was before Roberts, but
right, Landon Roberts. Obviously Dante Hightower is like the apex version of that.
Right. It is Hightower. I guess I know it's kind of a different
Ted
player.
Johnson. Landon Roberts is a good one. Juwan Bentley now. Even like Terez Hall, who we love to talk about from the 2020 season. Like, even though he didn't have a ton going for him, he was a sledgehammer. That guy could take on a guard. You want to lead through the line of scrimmage with a fullback. Terez Hall was meeting you at the party, right?
Right.
And that type of guy is a skill set. It's a type.
Yeah.
And they were able to find those types of guys. Man coverage corners. Like, we're not going to draft ball hawks. We're not going to draft zone guys. We're going to draft
Except
Christian
for one time with J.C. Jackson.
Yeah, well, that was a different situation. But we're going to draft Christian Gonzalez.
Yeah.
We're going to draft Marcus Jones. We're going to draft guys that can run
sign
with people.
Stephon Gilmore.
Right,
We're going to sign Darrell Rivas.
Yep. Jack Nelson from Wisconsin, the tackle. Hearing a lot about him. Yeah, because he's got all the traits and experience and stuff.
Wisconsin tackle.
I've seen a little bit of him.
I'm
as one of the emailers, everybody keeps asking me about that guy. I've seen a little bit of him. I haven't seen enough to like have a full take on it, but I've seen a little bit of him. And the one thing that I always worry about with tackles like that is like the height can be a detriment, right? Like if you're too tall and you don't have the flexibility in your lowers to like be able to sink and leverage and really get into your chair, then you can almost be too tall for the position.
Who was the guy when we were at the Shrine Bowl from Baylor?
Yeah.
Who was like 6'8", 330,
Yes.
and he was like physical as hell.
Yeah.
He was moving guys left and right, but he couldn't bend at all.
Yeah.
Do you remember who that
Yeah,
was?
I know who you're talking about.
Still bug me now.
But, like a guy like Joe Alt is really tall, but Joe Alt's got great lower body flexibility and great, knee bend. And that
he
type
can
of
make
stuff.
himself 6'2" like that.
Right, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. Andrew here, he emails in and says that he's worried about Josh McDaniels not because of a Patriots retread thing, but he's worried about changing systems on Drake May. And this is a fair concern. He said it's like, getting a Spanish teacher to teach German or a German teacher to speak whatever. And he's right. It's a different system. It's a different terminology. And if I had one concern with Josh McDaniels, it's not so much the change of the language. It's more so, I would say, how much his system puts on the quarterback at the line of scrimmage. I actually liked the idea of the center taking on a lot of those responsibilities, and I loved, we talked to AVP, I forget which time it was, but it was before the season started, and I remember he said to me that, the quarterback's got enough to worry about. Right? Like he's got to read the coverage, he's got to read the defense, he's got to read his progressions, he's got to get the ball out accurately, he's got to time up his footwork. Like he's got enough things on his mind to then also have to worry about protections and what's going on up front and all that kind of stuff. I actually really like the approach of putting most of that on the center. Now, they were able to do it with rookie year Mac Jones. So I don't know what they did that maybe streamlined it a little bit for Mac his rookie year, because I can't imagine Mac was out there his rookie season like a field general, putting everybody in their proper places. So maybe they did do some things to tweak it, Mac Jones's rookie season, to help him out. So maybe they could do that with Drake. But that would be my one concern with that system for Drake, is putting a lot more mentally on his plate pre-snap at the line of scrimmage, and maybe bogging him down a little bit and not letting him play as fast and loose as we know he can play. So I'm not necessarily worried about changing languages on him. I am worried about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, we heard him talk in camp about how in the West Coast system, he was like 14, 15-word play calls. And how that was a challenge. So you're not going to have, I think McDaniel still has some of those, but it's not going to be as many as it is in a West Coast playbook. It's the pre-snap stuff, and maybe they find a way, especially if Andrews is back, to kind of keep some of that with the center.
Yeah.
Even in McDaniel's system, kind of blend it. But I'm with you. By the way, that tackle was Connor Galvin.
Connor Galvin.
He's still on the Lions.
Yeah.
He's on IR, but he's on the Lions.
Yeah,
So.
I remember Connor Galvin. There's another one there, too, that was like similar build. That was also really tall, and also maybe went to Pitt. I want to say Pitt. I don't remember though.
Yeah, I just remember Connor.
Yeah, I remember both of those guys being there. So here's another question from Thomas that I've seen a lot. If you get one of these, we feel like we've sort of coined the phrase "tight pants guy." If you get the tight pants guy,
the YouTube chat's been all over you saying that. I think you've said it like if people are playing a drinking game, every time you say it, they passed out a long time ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I haven't even noticed that. Hey, this one says it in the email.
I'm not saying I'm not saying it's wrong. No, it's a good.
What
way
else
to
am
put
I?
it.
How else am I supposed to describe
No,
it?
it's a
I
good.
don't know.
It's a good shorthand. I just think it's funny that people in the chat noticed. Do not play that game, by the way. don't seriously don't.
If you hire that guy, I'm not going to say it again.
No,
if
you
hire,
can say, no,
if you-
now
if-
I
if
broke
you
the
hire,
fourth
if you
wall.
hire,
Say it.
If you
Say
hire
it.
the innovative offensive coordinator,
It takes
the
too long.
new AG, right? Exactly.
So say. I'm not saying you can't say it.
If you hire that guy, then can you hire McDaniels as a quarterbacks coach? I do not know why Josh McDaniels would do that. Like, Josh McDaniels is sitting pretty right now. The Raiders are still paying him. Like, he's got all the money in the world. I have no idea why he would come here to be a quarterback
If anything, I've wondered, could you do it the other way? Could you hire some young upshot coordinator and Josh McDaniels essentially becomes a much, 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 much better version of Ben McAdoo?
Yes. Yeah, that I think is definitely fair. Couple questions about some day 2 wide receivers. I don't know if this guy's going to go on day 2. Matthew Golden.
He's like the darling right now. Everybody loves Matthew Golden.
Yeah,
I
from like
texted you.
2 games in the playoff.
No, he's been good all year. Everybody's just discovering him because everybody was so locked in on Isaiah Bond during the year. Matthew Golden's a really good receiver. He's a really good. So I love those like well-rounded guys where I'm like, I don't know that he does any one thing amazing, but like find a weakness in his game he can't.
Yeah.
Maybe a little small, but like he looks like one of these complete guys that's just going to come in day one and go. And I know people, that's what you said about Jalen Polk. No, Jalen Polk was like, for what he was, seemed NFL ready, but he was what he was, which was like a chain mover. He wasn't super athletic, wasn't a separator. No, Matthew Golden has some explosiveness to him, has an ability to separate. He can create big plays. He's not a chain mover. He's a big play threat. He can make plays at all 3 levels. He's going to be like a fringe first-round pick. I think he's right there with Igbuka. Like, the top is Tet McMillan, and we've talked about this, the disclaimer, Travis Hunter is the number 1 Travis Hunter in the draft. He's his own thing. We're putting him to the side. Tet McMillan's best receiver in the draft. Luther Burden's number 2. I think when you get to that like next tier, right, it's Igbuka, it's Bolden. I feel like I'm missing somebody, but like he's right there in that next group.
Luther Burden.
No, I said I put Burden in between.
Okay. Yeah.
Burden's better than Igbuka and Golden, but he's not as good as McMillan.
So the other names that he put out there were Trey Harris, who I know a lot of people are big fans of.
We're going to talk a lot about Trey Harris.
And Jalen Royals, who I'm looking forward to seeing at the Senior Bowl. I haven't watched a ton of his film yet, but he's going to be in Mobile, which will be good. So Trey Harris, I watched a little bit of him the other day. The one thing that I noticed with him is, he's kind of more of like a builder of speed than he is like a true burner on the outside. He's got good size and a good catch radius. His hands are, has some of those tracking, over the shoulder focus drops, if you want to call them those. I'm not in love with Trey Harris's game. I see it, like I see the archetype that he fits, the outside, bigger X receiver. But I'm just saying, I'm not a big fan.
That guy from Ole Miss, you know what the take's going to be.
Yeah, but he's nothing like
he's
AJ
Mike
Brown.
Vrabel's age. I know, but get ready for a
But
bunch
like
of people
AJ
that
Brown
think
is a totally
that
different
he's Mike
animal.
Vrabel's
AJ
age.
Brown
I
is so
know.
good
I'm
in
not
the
saying
open
he is
field.
that. I don't think he is
AJ
that.
Brown's like a running back with the football. That's not
know,
Trey
but
Harris.
I'm get ready to hear that. That's all I'm telling you.
Jalen Royals, I'm looking forward to seeing down in Mobile. Like I said, I like Matthew Golden a lot. I definitely think Matthew Golden is more of like a Z or an off the line receiver. He doesn't.
He's not next.
He doesn't have the size or the play strength to play the X spot. And I saw some stuff, especially against Georgia, where he struggled a little bit against press and things of that nature. But he's really bursty. He's really smooth at the top of the route. One of those guys that doesn't have to decelerate too much at the top. Like, he can just break right through. He's got good explosiveness through the top. He's one of those players that if you move him around like a chess piece, you move him in motion, you start him in motion, cheat motion thing. Like, he's going to eat up and cushion fast and break really quickly.
I saw somebody say Jalen Waddle. I don't think he's quite that fast. But
so
usage-wise, I could see
So
it.
I texted you this last night.
Is that you who said that to me?
My comp for Matthew Golden right now is Jaden Reed.
Oh,
with
that was
Green
a good
Bay.
one. Yeah.
That's what I see because I think he has really good ball skills and he can win in some crowds and things like that, which is true with Jaden Reed too. But his special trait is his acceleration and his speed. And I think both those guys have that. So I'm with Matthew Golden. But again, I think with all these guys, and I'm really looking forward to the Miami kid,
Restrepo?
Restrepo.
Yeah, he's fine.
He's going to be down in Mobile as well.
Is Savion Williams going to be in Mobile?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. All of that tier is all going to be at the Senior Bowl.
Perfect.
Restrepo,
Sort them all out.
Restrepo excites me. He reminds
Yeah.
me a ton of Khalil Shakir.
He's bigger than that, though, isn't he?
I don't think so. Khalil Shakir is a decent size, like in terms of thickness. So I'm looking forward to seeing him too when he moves it and just runs with the football.
Khalil Shakir like 5'10"?
Yeah, probably like 5'10", 5'11".
Oh, Restrepo's only 5'10". I thought he was like
Yeah.
6 foot, 6'1". Okay.
Yeah. So it reminds me a little bit of Shakir, just the way that he weaves with the ball and good with the ball in his hands.
Well,
and
we're
things
on
like
this. You got any recency bias, guys?
that. I might, but give me a second.
Okay.
I want to read some more of these
All
emails.
right, we got a call too.
So this is Nicholas, and I've heard this name a ton. This one, Fred brought this name up. He's high on this player.
Oh boy.
So we both agree on this one for once.
Okay.
So Nicholas brings up Mason Graham.
Okay.
And my take on Mason Graham is that I hear where everybody's saying where, like, if you're just taking best player available and Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are off the board and you're just going best player available, there's a case for Mason Graham. But I'm not a just pure BPA type of guy.
Same.
I'm a best player available at a premium position of need.
Or best player available for the football team in specific.
So I think we're kind of
Yeah.
splitting hairs there. I am not drafting an interior defensive lineman at 4 overall unless the one caveat is that a doctor tells me that Christian Barmore is never going to play football again.
Right.
Which, God, I hope is not the case.
Right.
But I'm just saying if that is the case, then okay, like maybe we
It
can have
becomes
this.
more of a conversation.
But the only issue that I have with Mason Graham that high is that you are counting on him being like, I don't want to put him in Aaron Donald because that's unfair, but like, you know what I'm trying to say.
Fletcher Cox?
You're trying to put him in a tier where he is one of the elite interior pass rushers at the position, like
Yeah.
a top 5 player at that position. Chris Jones, Fletcher Cox, like we're talking about a stud of studs. If that's what you're telling me that he is, then okay. But it's almost like taking a guard. It's not quite as bad, but it almost is. Where like you better be getting freaking John Hanna if you're taking a guard that high. And I just don't know if Mason Graham is quite that good.
Yeah, I mean, you can answer this better than me. How are you going to get him and Barmore both on the field where he's on the field a significant amount as a top draft pick? Like, you need him on the field. As a defensive tackle taking that high, you're talking at least like 65, 70% usage rate. Barmore's, if he's healthy, he's probably one of your top 3 best players, right? It's him, May, and Gonzalez. So you want him on the field a significant amount. So now, like, what are you doing at end? Is one of them playing end? Now you're pretty big. Like, how's that good? I'm not saying it can't work, but you're really kind of putting yourself in a box if you make that pick. And you have to be damn sure that he's going to give you the outcome that you're expecting, because if not, it becomes really hard to justify that pick.
Right. So they're both 3 techniques naturally.
Right.
And so you could obviously make it work with them being 3-4 ends, like, 4-eye, 5 technique ends over the tackle or outside shade the guard on early downs. On passing downs, like, you worry about how that is going to fit together. Like, how do you have both those guys on the field? The Patriots in the past, they've always liked to run like that amoeba front where they have one down lineman over the nose. Like, okay, so now is that Christian Barmore or is that
Right.
Mason Graham? Are you going to play with 2-3 techniques? Okay, if you're going to do that, then you have nobody in the A gap. So now you have to find ways to cover the A gaps. And like those types of things are all, in consideration. With that type of pick, he's an up the field player as well. Like I don't look at Mason Graham on film and necessarily think of him as a great 2-gapping.
Yeah, he's not Vince Wilfork.
And he's not, a pure 2-gapping end either.
Yeah.
So in that respect, the guy that he reminds me of a lot of, and I know that this guy was drafted a little bit later, but has had a great rookie year for the Rams is Braden Fiske, right? Like he just up the field, absolute terror to block, and just a screamer, right? And that's a great player. Fiske is one of the best young players in the league
But that's
on
Barmore.
that side of the ball.
That's what you want Barmore to be.
Yeah, Barmore's more physical though. Barmore's stronger and stouter than Graham is. But yeah,
But I'm saying,
I
like,
do
in
worry
that
about
role, like,
Yeah.
you have that role filled.
Yeah, you do. It's one of the few roles that you have filled with a blue chip player.
Right, exactly. So, like, why double down on that with this premium asset?
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you there. David says that we need to get Vrabel on Catch-22, I'd love
Open invitation.
I'd love to see Stacy's face on that one.
Open invitation.
That would be good. Open invitation is right. Anytime he wants to come on.
Any of the coaching staff, really, not just him. Any of them.
Yeah. Man,
Offense coordinator's going to.
That's never going to happen.
Field day
and let's take these calls, and then we gotta end this plane because land this plane because I got some good interviews lined up on a place for Vrabel. By the way, I can pro tease that. I don't want to say who, but it's going to be a good one. All right. Dan is in Philadelphia. What's up, Dan? Or Don, sorry. Don.
Hey, guys. I just wanted to quickly ask, how appealing do you think New England is as a free agent destination with Vrabel as compared to, if Ben Johnson did come in? And I think you guys pretty much nailed it with the coordinator talk today, so I wanted to jump to the draft here. I'm kind of a firm believer that now with Vrabel as a head coach, I wasn't necessarily in on taking Travis Hunter if he's available, but I think Vrabel is the right coach to turn him into a special player in the league. But for this hypothetical, if Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are off the board, are you guys planning to stick there? Do you think the talent is there? Are you trading back? I know you just mentioned why have two blue-chip players like Mason Graham and Barmore on the defensive line, but is Will Johnson a consideration? Are you trading back and maybe thinking receiver? What's your draft strategy going forward? I'll take it off air. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for the call, Don. So on the first point about being a free agent destination, I'm interested to ask some players that for this piece about that, and because they did sign as free agents with Vrabel, but I do think it's better, certainly because
not current free agents,
like free agents that are coming up, in 2025.
No, that you're talking to them.
Yes,
saying these are
past guys, past
you're
guys.
not talking current free agents.
2025 guys though to go current. I do think it's a better sell, right? You have a guy that has a proof of concept and a guy that knows how to coach and can probably really present like a plan of like, this is how we're going to use you and this is what we're going to do and all those types of things. So I think it's definitely a better job than where they were. But money talks. Like it's going to take money still. Like they're still not a destination to the point where they're going to get guys at discounts.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. Compared to Ben Johnson, I think some of that's probably a personality thing. I think there's certain kinds of players that would probably rather play for Mike Vrabel. I think there's certain kinds of players that would rather play for Ben Johnson. I think they are more of a destination now than they were before, but yet they're not getting anybody without paying them the most money. At the end of the day, they got to pay people the most money to come here, whoever the coach is. Yeah,
I definitely also agree with the caller about Travis Hunter. Like I feel better. I still don't feel great about it.
Right. No, I definitely feel better. I don't. Yeah, I still don't know. I would take him over Will Johnson. Like if I need to, we're going to learn a lot at the combine about what his plans are. It's so hard to have a take about Travis Hunter because I don't know where he's going to play. And I don't know what his plan's going to be and how open he's going to be to different plans and things like that. Because that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. I assume that his answers...
I think he's going to the Giants. So
I think his answers at the combine are going to be that he wants to play both ways. I think that's what he wants to do.
It's just not realistic.
It's not, but I think that's what he wants to do, or at least do it in some sort of packaged way that it is realistic. He plays 25 snaps on defense and 25 on offense, or 10 on offense but 50 on defense. Try to find that happy medium. But I don't think that he's going to go in the league and only play on one side of the ball unless he gets into the NFL and maybe he has to learn the hard way. Like maybe he has to learn the hard way that this is too hard.
But I feel like if you get to that point, and when I say play both, he can be a package player, but that's what I worry about is he's too ambitious. The coaching staff is too ambitious. You get to the point where you're learning something the hard way. At that point, it's too late. Like now, all right, you're wasting time with this great player. So that's what worries me.
Yeah. All right. Sal is in Linfield, I believe it says. Yeah, Sal. What's up, Sal?
Hey, what's going on,
hey.
boys? It's Sal V, but my friends call me Money. Listen, I feel like the tackle position on this roster is not good enough. I was a standout in high school, and I think I could do a better job than Vidarian Lowe and the boys there. So I'm really liking the idea of drafting a tackle I really like Campbell. I also think we should probably move up somewhere in this draft, top 15 maybe, and look at Ashton Genty. I also Cam Scattaboo, however you say, he's pretty good player. But
I feel like this guy's
otherwise,
trolling
those
you.
boys have a good one. All right.
All right. Thanks, Sal.
That
might have been a troll. That might have been a troll.
I think
call.
so. I have said for the record, I do not think the Patriots should draft Ashton Genty in the first round.
I think they should draft Ashton Genty.
No, they have too many needs to take a running back that high. Look,
but he built it around Derrick Henry, Alex.
Ashton Genty's not. This is your same thing with comparing Mason Graham to Aaron Donald.
Oh, okay.
Let's not. I'm not comparing any. Derrick Henry. I've said this to you. We're never going to see a Derrick Henry again. Just because of one, how physically gifted he is, and two, the way the league's going, we're never going to see a guy like Derrick Henry again. Cam Scattaboo, good player. I would like to see him draft a running back. I do think with Vrabel, there is a chance they draft, especially if he doesn't believe Ramondre Stevenson can fix his fumbling issues.
Yeah.
I do think there's a chance they're going to take a running back somewhere that's going to make you uncomfortable. I don't think it's going to be in the first round. Maybe it's on day 2. Those Ohio State backs, man, if he wants to find, again, I'm not going to compare anybody to Derrick Henry, but if he wants to find himself a bell cow, right? 25 carries a game, 17 games a season, can weather the tear, can still be giving out body blows with all of that contact that he's taking. Oh, boy, would Quinshaw and Judkins be fun in that offense. Or Travion Henderson. I like Judkins a little bit better, but those Ohio State backs.
How much fun would he be, Marine?
Stop! Don't do that thing.
They're
good football
downhill
players.
at people.
Don't play good football.
We're gonna be physical up front. We're gonna be a bunch of hog mollies.
So you don't like the Ohio State running backs?
They're fine. I think this running back class is so deep and has so many names in it that just take someone.
I think there's a ton of good backs. I don't think you can miss a running back this year, but
yeah, I'm not putting any sort of priority on that position.
If they're going to go a little higher, which I wouldn't be surprised if they do, I like the Ohio State guys.
But that guy was definitely trolling.
Maybe
Scattaboo.
and you. Maybe Amari and Hampton is more realistic of a conversation than we thought.
There we go.
And reuniting him with Drake May. You like Hampton. I know you like Hampton.
I do like Hampton. I saw him at the pro day, and I am very, very as much recency bias as I have. I'm also biased to people that I saw in person.
So we got to get to the Ohio State guys.
I think most people that do this for a living are that way. Yeah. If you see somebody in person.
Seeing them in person.
So I definitely am. All right, that does it. I have to take a call at 2, so we have to go a few minutes early here. But I think next week,
somebody thinks that was Vrabel calling
it. Next week, I know we have a lot of questions in here about draft strategy and Vrabel's types and things. We obviously had to open the show today with our thoughts on the hire and all that kind of stuff to begin with. So next week we'll get right back into it, and then the week after that, not to make you feel bad because I wish you were coming with me, but the week after that, I will be in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. So we'll do a show. Alex will be here running the ship from home base, and I'll be at the Senior Bowl, so we'll have plenty of draft talk on that show. Obviously, will be all draft talk. We'll just do Mobile down there. So I'm really looking forward to that. My second trip to the Senior Bowl, so I'm excited for that, and I'm really excited just also to observe and see who's there from the Patriots. Will be interesting in itself. So we'll see what reports I can come up from there. But one more time. Our friends at Bud Light say easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the New England Patriots. All right, we'll see you guys next week, and we'll get into a lot of draft talk in a couple weeks when I'm in Mobile. But until then, signing off for Alex Barth, I'm Evan Lazar. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you for downloading this podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Google Play, and everywhere else you listen. Like the show? Please rate and review us. Listener comments and ratings help keep us high in the podcast rankings so new listeners can find us. Be sure to check patriots.com for more news and more podcasts.